This is Renee Romeo of ReneeRomeo.com. Today you're joining me in my guest room closet as I'm about to make a repair to my drywall. Now normally this bracket hangs nice and neat on the wall with the vacuum cleaner hose wrapped around it, but in taking the vacuum cleaner hose off, along with it came the bracket, and then you'll see behind it the drywall came with it as well. But you know what? This is a great opportunity for me to show you to make an easy drywall repair to something that is very, very common with homeowners or apartment dwellers as well. So the first thing we need to do is trim out all of these loose pieces. Now you can kind of just get in here with your utility knife, trim this out really well, and then make sure that you get all the loose pieces off, because if you don't, you're going to wind up with a lumpy surface when you're done. So you'll see I did have to trim around this a bit just to get that paper piece off the top so that it's not actually sticking out from the wall. I can run my hand over it and it's nice and smooth to the touch. So I've trimmed a little bit of tape here, and it's just a little bit wider than the hole that I'm working on. So we're just going to get this to adhere like this, and you'll see it doesn't quite cover the whole thing, so we need a second piece. And I'm slightly overlapping it over the first one, and so you'll kind of see here there's some wiggle room underneath that, but don't worry about it. The holes in the tape itself are going to allow the joint compound to seep in between that and make a beautiful, nice finish. I've stirred the joint compound in the bucket, making sure it's nice and smooth. And so at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put some pressure on this as I put it on top of the tape. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm trying to get that joint compound to actually go through the tape into those holes that I made. Now you'll see at this point it looks kind of messy. You don't want this to look nice and neat on the first try. What you're really looking for here is just to simply cover over the tape. You can still see some of the pattern here. Now you want 3 light coats, and the reason why is number one, you don't want this to be a nightmare to sand and have to sand through and create a lot of dust, and number two is because you don't want this to crack when it dries, and that there's really a potential for cracking if you layer it too heavily. So it's day 2, and you'll see this patched area is nice and dry. It did get a crack in this area that had the larger portion of the hole, and if this happens to you, don't worry about it on the first coat, because the second coat is going to cover it. We try to avoid it, but you know, sometimes things happen, and this is one of those cases. So at this point, what I've done, I'm taking my sandpaper that's been previously used, and I have a rag here that I've just moistened a bit, you know, really wrung it out well, so it's just slightly damp. I don't like to sand it with the sandpaper at this point, because what I'm going to wind up doing is just creating a mess of dust. You know, there's not all that much to actually sand down, and it's really great to do this in finished areas where you don't want the dust to fly. So I'm just kind of wrapping this, and I'm just going over this, you know, until I can knock down some of these little pieces here and there so that the area feels nice and smooth. And it's just going to take a few seconds. This looks and feels really good. So we're ready to go with our second coat. Now I filled this joint compound tray with enough joint compound to actually, you know, make it across this 9-inch blade on my putty knife. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of load this up a little bit, and you'll see that's about how much I have on here. You don't need much more than that. And all you're going to do at this point is you're going to drag it over the top of the first coat. Now, what you're doing here is just simply feathering. So you're going to feather this out. You know what? And you might get a little nervous because you might be thinking, oh my gosh, you know, this is just getting to be one giant patch. But you know what? The more you feather it and the farther out you bring your joint compound, the much smoother surface you're going to have, and you're not going to notice any lumps in this wall at all. It's going to look like one giant smooth finish. So just go ahead, just kind of drag this over. So this looks nice and smooth at this point, and I bet you could almost be done with it if you went ahead and sanded this off when it were dry. But, you know, a third coat is going to give this a glass-like finish, and that's exactly what you want. So we need to be a little bit patient and wait for tomorrow. This is a medium grit sandpaper that I'm using today, and all I'm doing here is just kind of taking it around the edge. I'm holding the vacuum cleaner underneath it. In case any dust falls, it'll fall right into the vacuum cleaner. So the inside of the tray is nice and full. So I'm just going to go ahead, use my putty knife, get a nice amount on here. And then again, same way as before, start at the top, go to the bottom, and you'll see, you know, this is really an easy process. And every time you use the larger knife, you're going to wind up covering over that previous spot and really feathering this out well. Now, you need to actually knock some of this down. You don't want a giant lump in the middle. Well, today is the exciting day. You know, we're going to finish up this project. If you run your hand over the top of it, you know, what really happened is that it's a nice, smooth, feathered feel. There's no lumping in the center where that giant hole was. And you might be thinking, you know, why is this so huge in the end? You know, you had a tiny little hole. How come I just can't patch that one little thing? Well, you really can't, because you'll wind up noticing the edges all around that hole. You can't really feather it out well. And you will get a lump there if you try to just fill in that one little piece. So this is really the right way to do it. 3 coats, and you run your hand over the top of it, and it is nice and smooth. You almost don't need to sand it at all. Almost. But at this point, you can go ahead and you can use a regular sandpaper, or you can use that method that I used earlier with the damp rag and nice flat surface and just over the top of it. So let me just show you how quickly this goes. And I have a can of Kills Latex Primer Sealer, and you know what? This is just going to be applied with a brush. It's really easy. We're just going to brush it on, really thin coat, and this is actually a necessity. You need to put primer on before you put paint, because otherwise the paint finish won't match up to the wall finish on the edges. The wall is nice and dry. If you run your hand over the top of it, there's absolutely no evidence of damage underneath. So if you have issues like this with your drywall, this is the right way to repair it. Over the course of several days, little tiny bit of work each day, and you'll get the same professional results that I did. And you know what? When I rehang the bracket, I'm using a stud finder and I'm putting it directly into the stud. I'm not making the same mistake twice. So this is Renee Romeo of ReneeRomeo.com. You know, if you loved watching this project, please share, like, follow, and subscribe, and I'll bring you more of these projects in the future. Thank you so much for watching.